Who was Idi Amin, and how did he rise to power in Uganda? Known as the Butcher of Uganda, his brutal reign left a trail of violence and terror that still haunts the country today. From a humble beginning to becoming a ruthless dictator, Amin's story is one of ambition, cruelty, and destruction. In this video, we'll explore how this once celebrated military leader turned into one of the world's most feared tyrants. Stay tuned as we uncover the dark legacy of Idi Amin and the devastating impact he had on Uganda. 1. The birth of a tyrant, Idi Amin's early years. Idi Amin was born in 1925 in Kiboko, a town located in present-day Uganda. He was the son of a tribal chief, but his early life was marked by hardship. Amin's father was absent from his life, and his mother raised him as a single parent. Growing up, Amin faced the harsh realities of colonial Uganda. British colonial rule controlled much of the country, and while Amin was part of the Kakwa ethnic group, he was subject to the same racial hierarchies that affected many indigenous Ugandans. During his youth, Amin faced constant discrimination, and his early education was limited, so he had little formal schooling. This lack of education and limited opportunities would later fuel his deep-seated resentment and desire for power. Amin's childhood experiences shaped his views on power and authority. Despite his limited formal education, he became known for his physical strength and athleticism, which helped him survive the challenges of his youth. 2. From laundry worker to military soldier, Amin's rise. Amin's journey into the military started with humble beginnings. He left his home in search of better opportunities and moved to Kampala, Uganda's capital, where he took a job as a cook and laundry worker. His work in these menial jobs exposed him to the realities of power structures within colonial Uganda. However, his physical prowess and determination to improve his life pushed him towards the military. In 1946, Amin enlisted in the King's African Rifles, KAR, a British colonial army. This was a pivotal moment in his life, as it provided him with both training and the chance to rise through the ranks. Initially starting as a private, Amin quickly gained recognition for his strength, loyalty, and military aptitude. Over time, he climbed the ranks within the army, becoming an officer. 3. A keen soldier, Amin's brutality in Somalia and Kenya. Amin's military career was marked by violence and ruthlessness, even in the early years. During his service with the British in the King's African Rifles, he participated in military operations in neighboring countries such as Somalia and Kenya. These operations were brutal, and Amin's role in them showcased his ability to carry out acts of violence without hesitation. In the 1950s, Uganda was still a British colony, and much of the army's work involved suppressing uprisings in neighboring regions. Amin's involvement in these missions made him notorious for his brutal methods of control. He became a feared figure, even among his fellow soldiers, due to his readiness to use extreme force. 4. A rising star, Amin's promotion in Uganda's army. In the early 1960s, Uganda gained independence from Britain. With this new political landscape, the country's military also underwent significant restructuring. Amin's role in the army grew, and he gained the trust of Uganda's first Prime Minister, Milton Obote. This trust would prove to be both beneficial and dangerous for Amin's future. Amin's rise to power in the army was swift, as he became a close confidant of Obote. His leadership qualities, along with his ruthless actions, earned him the position of Chief of Staff of the Uganda Army in 1966. However, his growing ambition began to put him at odds with others within the Ugandan military and political establishment. 5. The path to power, Amin's coup and overthrow of Obote. By 1971, Amin's ambitions had grown far beyond his role in the army. While Milton Obote was out of the country attending a Commonwealth summit, Amin saw an opportunity to strike. He orchestrated a coup that was swift and largely bloodless. In January 1971, Amin led a military coup that deposed Obote, taking control of Uganda's government. The coup was a result of a mix of ambition, military strategy, and a desire for personal power. Amin's takeover was marked by the promise of a return to law and order, but he quickly revealed his true intentions. Upon seizing power, Amin had Obote's allies arrested or killed, cementing his control over the government. Amin's coup was a turning point for Uganda, as it marked the end of one era and the beginning of another, one dominated by military rule, brutality, and an increasingly paranoid and unpredictable leadership. 6. A dictator in the making, Amin's early reforms and self-crowned titles. Once in power, Amin quickly began consolidating his control over Uganda. His early reforms included the declaration of himself as Uganda's president and military leader. Amin assumed numerous titles, including His Excellency and President for Life, demonstrating his desire for absolute power. He also sought to distance himself from colonial influences, which involved rejecting British control and asserting his dominance in the international sphere. However, despite his early promises of improving the country, Amin's reforms were often self-serving and destructive. He encouraged nationalist rhetoric and proclaimed himself a champion of African liberation. However, many of his policies, such as expelling Asians from Uganda and nationalizing businesses, led to economic chaos and social unrest. 7. The expulsion of Asians, Amin's economic and political scapegoating. One of Amin's most notorious policies was the expulsion of Uganda's Asian population, primarily those of Indian and Pakistani descent, in 1972. He justified this decision by claiming that the Asians were economically exploiting Ugandans, although the actual motivation was likely more about consolidating power and appeasing his supporters. Amin ordered the expulsion of about 60,000 Asians from the country, giving them only 90 days to leave. This move led to the collapse of Uganda's economy, as many of the country's most skilled workers and entrepreneurs were of Asian descent. The expulsion created widespread economic instability, and the country's infrastructure began to crumble. 8. Terror and massacre, Amin's ruthless reign. Once in power, Amin's regime became infamous for its violence and brutality. The country experienced widespread repression, with political opponents, suspected enemies, and anyone who threatened Amin's power subjected to torture, imprisonment, or death. It is estimated that hundreds of thousands of Ugandans lost their lives during his reign. Amin created a secret police force, which carried out arbitrary arrests, brutal interrogations, and mass killings. Political opponents were often executed publicly to send a message of fear to the populace. His regime also targeted Uganda's ethnic minorities, particularly the Akali and Langi tribes, who were seen as Obote supporters. 9. The bloody legacy, the systematic elimination of Uganda's military elite. One of the most brutal aspects of Amin's reign was his systematic purge of Uganda's military elite. He feared that former allies and members of the military could challenge his rule. In 1972, Amin ordered the execution of several high-ranking officers, some of whom were his trusted companions. These actions created an atmosphere of paranoia and fear within the army and government. Amin's purges were not limited to just the military. He also targeted anyone who was seen as a political or ethnic rival. This included intellectuals, business leaders, and even his own family members. As a result, Amin's government was left in a state of constant flux, with high-ranking officers constantly shifting and alliances being broken. 10. The final days, Amin's international isolation and brutality. As the years passed, Amin's reign became increasingly erratic. His relationships with other countries grew strained, and Uganda was increasingly isolated on the global stage. International condemnation of Amin's human rights abuses mounted, and many countries cut ties with Uganda. Meanwhile, internally, the economy continued to deteriorate, and the population was living in poverty and fear. By 1978, Amin faced increasing opposition from both within Uganda and from neighboring countries. In the same year, Tanzania invaded Uganda, and a coalition of Ugandan exiles and rebels fought back against Amin's regime. The war ended with Amin's eventual defeat and flight into exile in Saudi Arabia in 1979. Despite his removal from power, Amin's legacy remains one of brutality and terror. That wraps up our look into the brutal reign of Idi Amin, the Butcher of Uganda. His legacy serves as a chilling reminder of the power of dictatorship and the cost of unchecked ambition. If you found this video insightful, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more history content. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below and let us know what you think about Amin's impact on Uganda and the world. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more stories from history.